All right, joining us today on Pirate Radio Live, Kevin Copp to continue our opponent previews. And today we're talking Temple Owls football. Kevin, we appreciate your time. How you doing today?
Absolutely. Doing great. Happy to be here.
Man, for years we had Harry Donahue on our show talking Temple football with that classic, legendary voice, and it was a lot of fun to talk to him every year. Kevin, let's get to know you a little bit. Can you just tell us about your background? Where did you grow up, and how did you get to the spot that you're in right now?
Sure. So, no, I'm glad you mentioned Harry because, like many of us that grew up in the Philadelphia area, I grew up listening to Harry. He was actually the first time I encountered his distinctive voice was he would do the school closing numbers. I'm old enough where you would listen to
Right.
the
Okay.
radio, turn on KYW, and they'd go through the school closing numbers. We were 307, so we always wanted that on snow days. But yeah, having the chance to come to Temple, I've been here 11 years in the last 5 is our radio voice taking over for Harry in that role. And yeah, really exciting 2026 season coming up here in Philadelphia. We're really excited.
So, are you a Philly guy all around? Sixers, Eagles, Phillies, Flyers,
Yeah,
all of the above?
Philly guy all around. Grew up in King of Prussia, about 10 miles west in the suburbs of Philly. Actually went down to school at the University of Georgia, so I spent close to 9 years down south. But met a Jersey girl down there. Came back here to the Philadelphia area. So yeah, we are Philly through and through. So happy to be back up here at Temple.
I was in South Jersey last week at my wife's family, Cumberland County and
Sure.
Elmer. I don't know. It's
Yeah,
what, 30
yeah, that's
minutes or
way down
so?
south. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. But there we go. 15-second thoughts on the Jalen Brown trade.
I mean, it's the Sixers are funny. We spent the last 10 years. It's like every time you think that you're out, they pull you back in, and I got to give them credit. The fact that they managed to unload the albatross that was the Paul George contract and be able to get a guy like Jalen Brown. But it's so funny being Philly now. We've all turned our attention to getting LeBron in here. That's what everyone thinks the next step in the puzzle is. So we'll see what the next 48 to 72 hours hold.
And who knew that this was the process? After all, this
Exactly,
is the
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
And we won't talk any Phillies. I'm a Braves fan, and
Okay.
we have absolutely collapsed. And here come the fighting Phils. So
A lot of
should be a
season left, but yeah,
yeah.
it's been good so far.
Well, how about the Temple process going back now, man, more than 10 years, and the thing they had rolling there with, man, they'd bring in a good coach, that coach would get hired, they'd bring in another good coach, and man, just kept flipping it. And I called it a bit of a Temple curse with East Carolina, but they were beating everybody back then, so it wasn't just us. We were finally able to flip that the last few years and beat Temple, but maybe they got their next winning coach there in Philly with Casey Keeler. How about his first year? We'll talk about that ECU game. That almost kind of flipped the season, it looks like, for Temple. But year one for Casey Keeler, how did that go for everyone?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just an enormous success any way you look at it. Especially, you're right. It's we've been thinking a lot about that kind of last golden era of Temple football this year because we have Penn State back on the schedule. So it's reminding a lot of folks of that 2015 season and into 2016 when Temple had those back-to-back 10-win years and like you said, really had it going before a lot of the attrition in coaches and players kicked in. But yeah, Casey Keeler coming in last year, I mean, just an absolute home run to be able to get someone with his pedigree in. And I think really, not to look ahead too long term, but a guy who's also not using this job as the stepping stone to get
Right.
to the Power Four job. I mean, it's been described by him as a retirement job. That's not me saying that. This is a guy who's building a house in Delaware, who's from here, who's got family here, grandkids. So I mean, I think it's just brought a little bit of stability to the long term future of the program in a different way. But just looking at 2025, I mean, to come out after 4 straight 3-9 seasons, to be able to inject the life back into the program that he did, finished a game shy of 6-6, finishing there at 5-7. I think it was a tough schedule, home against Oklahoma, at Georgia Tech, which was a much tougher game, I think, than anyone anticipated. And then, a couple games tough late in the conference schedule. But, to have that team back and being competitive and being in games in the conference and it's brought a lot of optimism and excitement. I think, just what I hear from Temple fans going into this 2026 season is unlike anything, in the last probably 6 or 7 years here.
Man, that from an ECU perspective, one of my favorite wins last year was the win at Temple, because I remember going into that game, they had been really, really good. Come off 2 straight road wins. They had that narrow home defeat. Was it overtime maybe to Navy? It was, I know, a nail biter.
1 point game,
Yeah.
kind of, not overtime, but right down to the final seconds. Yeah.
And I know your QB had not thrown a pick going into that ECU game. We got him in the first quarter, and it went ECU's way. And you could say, like, man, that derailed the season, but that, man, it was backloaded with good American teams the end of that Temple schedule, and you end up losing the rest of the way. But how about that stretch at the end, man? That one elusive win to kind of get you in a bowl game you couldn't quite get.
Yeah, it really, you hate to say it, but it really comes back to that Navy game. I mean, They lost that game 32-31. They had a couple, I mean, you can go back and kind of look at the last 90 seconds, 2 minutes of that game, and there were like 7 different things that all had to happen for Navy to end up. They converted a 4th down. The Temple nearly had a fumble that they recovered. They jumped off sides on another play that would have ended the, just so many 2nd and 3rd and 4th and, 6th and 7th chances for Navy to lose that game by 1. Because, if you do the math, knowing that ECU, that was going to be a really tough game with ECU coming in. They had another 1-point loss the following week at Army, 14-13. Another one of those classic service academy games. Temple touched the ball twice in the second half. I think Army finished that game on an 18-play drive with like 10:30 left on the clock. Temple never got the ball back. And then, home against Tulane at North Texas. I think it was always clear that those 2 games sitting there at the end of the schedule, you kind of needed to get that 6th win before you got into that closing stretch. And, it just didn't happen. I think ECU was obviously a big part of that, but it's not one that I think if a lot of Temple folks were being honest coming into the season, that's not one that you would have had circled as, hey, this is one we're probably going to get. I think it was just some of the, the 2 1-point losses against the service academies. I think as a lot of folks look back at last season, those are the 2 that really stick out.
Kevin Copp joining us. I got trusty Phil Steele magazine. Phil Steele will join us on the show coming up next Friday. Looking forward to that. He has Temple 10th, but like you look at this thing, 4 through 10, you can kind of throw them in a hat and pick them out. At least that's how it appears. The first couple of things I look at, Kevin, is is your head coach back? Is your quarterback back? So head coach, check. What's the quarterback situation at Temple this year?
Quarterback is not a check, and that's actually, I think, one of the big questions, because there are a lot of checks in terms of what comes back. And as being in this league, it's not insignificant to return your head coach, and not just that, the entire coaching staff kept intact, and the great majority of starters as well. So all of a sudden you go from a team that really had no continuity, that obviously had a coaching change coming into 2025, to now it's like you look around and say, okay, year 2, well, he's one of the longest tenured coaches in the league. So I do think that is a real source of advantage. I know they feel really good about the position they're in, just going into this season with another year under their belts. But yeah, Evan Simon last year, you noted it. I think the biggest thing that he did was simply keep Temple in games by not turning the ball over, to make it as far in the season as he did, with ECU being that first interception. I think he lost a fumble against Navy, but first interception of the year coming in week 7 or 8 of the season. He brought a tremendous amount of leadership, through the coaching change. Just one of those guys who he transferred into the program from Rutgers, but had been here for 3 seasons at that point, was looked at as a real leader on this team. And so, yeah, to me, that is, question number 1. First of all, everyone always wants to talk about the quarterback. And second, when you have this many returning pieces, on both sides of the ball, but your quarterback is a question mark, I think it becomes kind of intensified. So yeah, that's to me storyline number 1 coming into this season.
With the returners, and that's great to hear. There's a lot. We've talked to App State, all the new guys they have there. Old Dominion, same. Rice, a ton of transfers. But with those returners, can you identify strength of the team heading into the year anyway?
Yeah, I think, and it's funny, for those of us that have been around Temple the last couple of years, I think, you start with the offensive line, which is, not just not been a strength, but probably, you go back to the last couple of seasons before 2025, been the, probably most glaring weakness of the team. And I thought, one of the really interesting and important things that this coaching staff did was, they kept that offensive line together, which, again, wasn't a great selling point coming into 2025. And then they put together a great year. I mean, protecting Evan Simon is a big part of why, Temple turned the ball over as little as they did and actually got to establish a running game, which Temple had struggled as the worst team in the league running the ball the few seasons before that. And so they've brought back the core of that offensive line. And I know a couple of those guys were highly prioritized in terms of roster retention and other programs having interest. And so I think it starts there, and you count along with that. I think the single biggest weapon that Temple has, literally and figuratively, is Peter Clark at tight end. A guy who I think is going to hear his name drafted at the end of this season. I know got some big time Power Four conference offers, and probably could have even entered into the draft as a draft eligible junior. He's back, and so I think that gives whoever's at quarterback a big time weapon. And again, the ability to help out the offensive line in the blocking phase of things as well. Peter Clark, I think, is probably the single most talented player that Temple has on their roster, and that's a good piece to build around moving into the season.
Kevin, I try to be, kind of grow with the times, but I do have some old man thoughts when it comes to sports. And one of those is I like my receivers to wear 80s and my running backs 20s, linebackers 50s. But when it's your own personal thing, I think it's cool. And the Temple Tough, the single digit number, you had those great defensive players. Years ago, I was a big Matt Ioannidis fan because I'm a Redskins Commanders guy, so I wanted him to be there a while. I thought he was great, but man, just such a great run on those players. And first of all, do you still do the single digit thing, with your D line or linebacker? And how about the defensive side of the ball for Temple?
Yeah, they do. So each coach has kind of put its spin on that tradition, and it goes back to Al Golden, and then Matt Ioannidis was kind of in those golden glory days that we're talking about under Matt Rule, wearing number 9, which has commonly been associated with the defensive line. A lot of guys that have gone on to the league wearing that number 9. So right now, there's only 2 holdovers in single digits from last year. Interestingly, neither of them are on the defensive side of the ball. One is a receiver, number 1, Colin Chase. The other, if you can believe it, is a punter, number 7, Dante Atten. First specialist to ever be awarded a single digit. So, nice. Each coaching staff has put a little different spin. And I think one of the things that was really important for Coach Keeler, as he's talked about, was getting away from it being, I think it had kind of become a little bit of a popularity contest type of thing, and really going back to identifying, in the old days, the guys that are most emblematic of that Temple Tough mindset. So to transition that to the defense, even though they don't have any single digits, I know Eric Stewart is kind of the guy that they're building around there at the linebacker position. There's been a lot of great linebackers and those kind of swing guys. You think of a Hassan Reddick, who ended up being a first-round draft pick, has been in the NFL. Sharif Finch, who's played in the NFL. Those kind of hybrid guys. I think Eric Stewart is one of the guys in that type of mold, and a guy who missed some time due to injury. I thought really flourished last year in his first full season of being able to play here at Temple with the coaching change, and now has developed into a real leader on the defensive side of the ball. They've brought a lot of reinforcements in on the defensive line. I think it's one of the areas where, you're trying to judge a team in the offseason is always hard, but you just look at the size and the athleticism that they've been able to bring in on the defensive line, I think has been really exciting. And if there is a question mark defensively for this team, I do think it's in the secondary. I think that's the area where you don't have quite as many returning pieces. And it's going to be incumbent on some new names, some transfers, some guys that we haven't yet become acquainted with to kind of carry the load there. That's the area that I think is probably the least settled getting ready to head into camp.
And Kevin, I'll apologize for this question, whether it be Harry Donahue, we talked to Ryan Wallen a lot from Al's Daily, whoever we talk to, I ask about a facility, an on-campus stadium, other than the link. It's either a question that is not worth talking about, or you're sick of talking about or being asked about. But let's get an update. Like, any talks of that, or is the link the home for the foreseeable future?
Yeah, the conversation has evolved over the years. Where we are right now, the Link is the home for the foreseeable future. I mean, I think it's one of those things that we all dream about. Again, I was fortunate enough to spend 10 years down in the SEC, so I know acutely well what it means to have an on-campus stadium and what that can mean. And obviously, look no further than Greenville and the atmosphere on game day and at ECU. That's always one of our favorite stops on the road because it's such a tremendous environment. So no, I think those of us that have been at Temple a long time, the dream is never dead. There's always, those conversations bubble up, and they're making some real improvements to Temple's campus, which is about 3 to 4 miles north of the Link. Just on the other side of Center City, Philadelphia. They're doing some big construction projects right now. They're building a new journalism school across Broad Street. So there's always cranes and there's construction going on in the city. So there's we allow ourselves to think about the day where there could be something like that, but for right now, really happy to get to play at the home of the Eagles. And I think one of the really interesting side notes is, you talk to a lot of these guys that are transferring in, especially, that it continues to be a draw. I think they really do like playing in an NFL stadium, home of the Philadelphia Eagles. And I think it's a cool thing. But yeah, on campus, college football is, I think it's the heart of the sport, and it's part of what makes it so special.
Kevin, proving that not all Philly and Eagles fans are bad people. Seems like a nice fella. So I'm going to extend my hand here, Kevin, and say, and I've said this a lot, hate the team, hate the green, but the Bryans, Brian Westbrook, Brian Dawkins are, I would have to say, my favorite Eagles. Great players. So
I was gonna say you made two really good picks right there. Yeah, if you're gonna go with it, that's a good two.
Now I need you to tell me a couple of your favorite Redskins / Commanders of all time.
Matt Ioannidis. There you go. We already talked about
man.
it. Yeah.
How about a cop out answer there from
That's
Kevin?
right.
But no, I'll take that. I'll take that. Kevin, appreciate the chat, man. Have a great rest of your summer. We'll get you back on week of the game and talk more. But really enjoyed it. Thank you, and we'll talk to you down the road, man.
All right. Can't wait. Thanks so much. Take care.